Nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg hängte die Sowjetunion einen eisernen Vorhang über die osteuropäischen Nationen. Für ca. 30 Jahre
After World War II, the Soviet Union clamped an iron curtain over the nations of Eastern Europe. For some 30 years, millions lived in fear under the brutal tyranny of Soviet-style communism. Freedom to worship was severely restricted, even prohibited under a harsh atheistic regime. But God could not be killed, nor would he abandon his faithful believers.
He spoke to us on a soccer field near Zagreb. It poured rain. But no one cared and no one left. Because here in Yugoslavia, in spite of restrictions, God was pouring out his blessings on us.
10 years later, Billy accepted the invitation of Hungarian Christians to come to their country. His first invitation, to preach in the Soviet bloc.
Now God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever
God spoke to many of us during Dr. Graham's visit to Communist Poland in 1978. I myself saw him at St. Anne's Church in Krakow. His message of a personal Jesus filled my heart like a breeze of fresh air.
Co się dzieje?
in some mysterious way
W jakiś tajemniczy sposób,
that none of us can ever understand.
czego nie potrafimy zrozumieć.
God took your sin.
Bóg wziął na siebie twój grzech.
After communism overcame Russia's old Tsarist regime in 1917, thousands of churches were destroyed, and almost all the rest were closed. In 1959, Billy Graham went to Russia as a tourist, but he was strictly forbidden to preach. Burdened in his spirit by what he saw, he visited Moscow's vast Lenin Stadium and prayed that someday God would open the door for him to preach in this spiritually desolate land. For decades, however, it seemed impossible.
Finally, Dr. Graham was allowed to preach in Russia and first came to see us in Moscow in 1982. It was as if Christ were saying to his Russian lambs, I have not forgotten you. My whole family squeezed into the balcony of the church to hear Dr. Graham. It was so cold outside that day, but our spirits were warmed by the message of God's love.
Lord, I thank you for saving me now.
Господь, благодарю Тебя за спасение.
Help me to serve you
Помоги мне служить Тебе
in the fellowship of his church.
в общении с церковью Твоей.
In Romania, in spite of its long Christian tradition, President Ceausescu had created a fiercely atheistic state, but he had not counted on the power of God.
That's why Christ died on the cross and shed his blood.
Not even a repressive government could stop God from bringing Reverend Graham to Romania. I saw it with my own eyes. Hundreds of thousands packing through churches and streets to see him. Our communist authorities were furious, but we were filled with joy.
And now God says, I can forgive you.
Și acum Dumnezeu îți spune, te pot ierta.
I can wipe your sins out as though they never existed.
Pot spăla păcatele tale așa cum niciodată n-ar fi existat.
I place you in my...
Nothing symbolized the division between the communist states of Eastern Europe and the rest of the world more vividly than the Berlin Wall, erected in 1961 by East Germany's communist government to stop the escape of its citizens to the West. Premier Khrushchev even came from Russia to inspect it. For almost 30 years, East Germans tried every means possible to escape, and many were killed in their attempts to be free. Christians on both sides of the wall prayed that God would one day intervene and knock it down. God heard their prayers and answered them sooner than they could have hoped. Throughout the 80s, God used political and religious leaders, workers and intellectuals to loosen the stranglehold of atheistic ideology. Freedom was in the air, and communism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union began to weaken. And Billy Graham was in the forefront, continually seeking to deliver the good news of hope and salvation to the oppressed. During this time, God softened the hearts of many communist officials, enough to enable Billy to bring God's word to hundreds of thousands living behind the Iron Curtain. Being able to preach in communist Eastern Europe was an incredible breakthrough for Christ.
He had never committed sin.
Он не совершил никакого греха сам.
He had never broken God's moral
Он
law.
не нарушил моральный закон Бога.
He never deserved to die.
Он не заслужил смерти.
But in those
In the years that followed, Christians who had quietly lived by faith in atheistic states for so long boldly emerged to pack churches and city squares whenever Billy preached.
Și în conștiința mea proprie,
when you do something wrong,
când faci ceva rău,
there's a little voice that speaks to you
există o voce micuță care îți spune
and tells you it's wrong.
și îți spune că e rău ce ai făcut.
Why?
De ce?
Now, as you get older, you don't hear that voice
Dar cu cât devii mai bătrân, n-auzi vocea aceea.
because you can harden your heart.
Pentru că îți poți împietri inima.
You can deaden your conscience.
Poți să-ți arumbrești conștiința.
Conscience may speak, but you no longer hear it.
Conștiința poate încă să vorbească, dar nu mai auzi.
Now, who put that little voice in your heart?
Cine a pus aceea micuță voce în inima ta?
God.
Dumnezeu.
And we're made in God's image.
Și noi suntem creați
On November 9th, 1989, thousands of freedom-loving Germans proved to be more powerful than the armed might of tyranny. They pierced the wall with sheer force of will, and overnight, like Jericho of old, it fell crumbling into the dust of history. As the 80s closed and communism collapsed, the political map of Europe was being redrawn. In a new search of freedom, God opened more avenues for evangelism, far greater than anyone could have ever imagined.
We're going to wait on you
Мы подождем, пока вы подойдете.
because you're standing at the crossroads of your life.
Потому что вы стоите также на перекрестке своей жизни.
And you come.
Идите к Богу в покаянии.
Somehow, some way, God will see that you make your way.
Как-нибудь Бог поможет вам пройти.